We've been working this week with how to do our work in the world by kind of identifying what is our dharma would be the word that we would use in both yogic practice and also Buddhism. We hear that word dharma a lot. And basically what your dharma is your life work. What is yours to do in the world, your contribution to the greater wholeness or whatever. So first of all, we have to figure out what that work is. And sometimes we feel like it's one thing and it turns out to be another. That's happened probably to all of us. But also how to get ourselves, small s self, out of the way so that the work that is important to do or the work that needs to be done in our lifetime gets done without being tainted or sort of skewed by our ego. And so part of the way that we're doing this is finding enough quiet and enough calm and enough stillness to, first of all, be open and listen. So we're going to do a little bit of stillness with the heart open kind of stuff to open ourselves up to that. And then also, once we kind of figure out what is our work to do in the world, how to approach that work without seeking personal gain, without having too strong of an opinion about how that work unfolds. That one's a really tough one for me as a currently still in recovery for the last 20 years control freak, having to figure out, kind of how to allow the work to flow through us rather than trying to direct the work. And an easy way to kind of understand that is how to let go of being the doer and how to open yourself up to allow the doer, like capital D, the source or the universe or the wholeness that is to flow through us. And this requires, of course, humility, stillness, clarity, patience, and we're going to try to work with all of that today. So the first thing that we're going to do is just come to our seated position like we usually start class and just kind of finding our stillness. And I didn't mention before we started, but if you have a couple of blocks, those could come in handy for practice today. So first, just finding a steadiness in the low body. See if we can approximate or come close to that equal balance or that equanimity of effort and ease. Maybe the ease is in the low body as we settle into stillness, and the effort is in that lifting of the heart and the ribs. Notice as you lift the heart and ribs what happens in the shoulders. They tend to soften down and back as the heart lifts up and forward. And I think this is symbolic and worth mentioning simply because we're trying to get ourselves out of the way. And as we open our hearts to receive, the shoulders, which represent responsibility, soften down and back. They sort of take a back seat. And so we want to let go of the responsibility for saving the world and also yet be open to playing our role in that wholeness or that walk toward wholeness, that journey toward wholeness. Just notice how that ease in the pelvis and that little bit of effort in the abdomen allow the breath to flow a little bit less impeded, more space in the heart and lungs. And then we're going to take a few breathing exercises here to begin to warm up the shoulders and arms and hands. So hands can come down beside you along the mat. And on our inhales, this is like 2 full breaths for this movement. On our inhale, we're going to sweep up and just kind of gather up everything around us, bringing the palms together. On our exhale, pulling hands into heart. Inhale, hands rise back up. And exhale, hands come back to the earth. So this is our motion. Just kind of continue with the pace of your own breath. We gather and then pull into our heart that guidance. And then we offer our work back up and manifest it in the world. So that's what this is symbolic of. See if you can kind of bring a little bit of devotion to this very simple movement as we link breath and movement together, aligning us with that flow of compassion, creativity, plenty and abundance, pulling it into our heart, and then offering whatever we receive right back to the source. Maybe 2 more complete movement cycles here, so about 4 breaths. When you come to your last round, you can either leave your hands alongside the body or just place them in your lap. Once again, just check in with your breath. Notice how aligning our action or our movement with that flow of prana and breath has maybe changed a little bit of a feeling in the body. We might feel more confident or more relaxed here. And we're just going to move our neck and spine, upper spine a little bit. So if your eyes are closed, just gently allow them to open, look straight ahead, and not at anything in particular. Keep your gaze very fixed, but not particularly on any one thing. Just notice how this steadiness of vision lends a steadiness to the body. We'll use this again as we take some balancing poses later today. This is also called drishti or focus. And as you stare straight ahead at whatever your eyes have landed on, begin to, while keeping that steady focus, just kind of begin to see what you can in your periphery without moving the head or the eyes. Just kind of notice how far out you can see from whatever single point you've landed on. Once you kind of gathered in all of that periphery, we're going to shift the gaze and lift the chin to look straight up. So the back of the neck isn't collapsed, but we're gazing upward. And this is us kind of acknowledging that higher path. So not just looking straight ahead at the reward or our personal gain, but looking upward to see what the higher self would do, or opening ourselves up to that guidance from above. And again, just with your gaze very fixed, just notice what you can see in your periphery. Try to get the whole picture even as your gaze is fixed and focused. Shifting again to looking inward towards the heart, chin drops down towards the chest, and we're just kind of gazing inward. Again, keeping your gaze fixed and focused. Notice what you can see in the background or in the periphery. I've noticed that when I take this downward facing shape, I still see in my periphery, but it's a lot less than when I'm looking upward or outward. So just kind of noticing that, how sometimes when we're looking at the self, we kind of miss some other things around us. Then coming back to facing forward again, kind of get that fixed gaze. And then we'll look over each shoulder. So turning to one side, and again, fixing the gaze on nothing in particular, but staying focused, and then taking in as much periphery as you can. Heart is still forward. Power center is still forward. But the gaze has shifted. This is us maybe taking some time to stop and smell the roses rather than being really driven straight ahead. Switch to the other side, kind of gazing over the other shoulder now. Fixed gaze, but taking in the whole picture, noticing how far out into the periphery you can take in information. Sort of a practice in wholeness, that as we look at one thing, we can sort of take in everything. Coming back to our centered focus, eyes can remain open or closed here. We're gonna bring hands back out to the side. Inhale, sweep up again, gazing upward. And as you exhale, take a twist. We'll do both sides. You can start whichever side you like. And notice now that's not just the gaze that's shifted, but also the heart. So if you can still find that ease or softness in the low belly, sometimes when we twist, we tend to lift the heart so much that we have some tension in the hips. See if you can let that go. We'll come out of this twist on an inhale, rising back up, palms meeting above the head, gazing upward, and then exhaling to the other side. Again, softening through the hips, finding your steadiness, keeping the heart open, And again, noticing what you can see all around. On an inhale, we'll sweep arms up again, gazing upward towards the thumbs, and then exhale, coming back to a seat. The feet are going to come out in front of us, so we can uncross the legs. Feet are going to come wide. We're going to take a few sort of active rolls and then kind of see if we can balance into a boat pose. So what we're going to do is kind of rock the boat by taking some of those kundalini rolls along the spine. Just kind of gently rocking forward and back. And when you come back to being on the sitting bones, lengthen up your spine. Hands might rest at the front of the knees or the backs of the thighs. And again, we'll just keeping that length in the spine, rock back enough that the heels lift. We might stay here. Well, there's several other options we could take. We could bring the knees and feet parallel to the floor. We might straighten the legs. Hands can rest on the thighs or knees for steadiness. We might also reach forward or up and back. The most important part of this pose is the engagement of the core and that straight, flat back. So when you feel ready to come out, just drop your heels, maybe steady yourself, reset your spine, and rock back in. We're gonna stay in this shape for about a minute and a half or so. So please feel free to come in and out of the shape at will. Maybe take a few breaths in the shape and then a few breaths out of the shape. Feel free to take a different option or variation each time you come into the pose. Keeping that steadiness and the flat back. Maybe there's a drishti just past the toes or straight ahead or upward in some way. If you come out of the pose a few times, each time you go back in, make sure that back is nice and flat. Hands could also rest on the floor here for steadiness. There's lots of options we can take with arms and legs. So feel free to experiment as you come in and out of the shape. Sometimes when we are doing the work of the divine or when we're engaged in our dharma, we find that there's a balancing act between what we think should happen and what actually needs to happen. And there's sort of an effort or a floating feeling when we get it right, and yet there's so much effort involved. What we want to try to do is find a way to feel effortless about this work, letting it flow through us rather than doing the work ourselves. Maybe about 10 or 12 more breaths to flow in and out of this shape. When you're ready to come out, just bring your heels back to the floor. We can take a few more of those kundalini rolls along the spine, but eventually this time we're gonna land with the spine supported against the floor. So sacrum, shoulders, and back of the head resting on the mat. Feel free to take a moment or so to lengthen the spine and kind of feel that steadiness in the back of the body. I forgot to mention that this might be a good spot for a block. So if you have a block handy, maybe set that just to the side of your mat. So the first thing we're gonna do is just take a few active bridge poses. So without moving any of the rest of your body, find steadiness in your feet, in your shoulders, in your head, and in your hands. And we're just gonna isolate our movement here to the pelvis. So we have a nice focus on just one part of the body. On an exhale, as your navel draws in towards the spine, point the tailbone up. So the sacrum is still on the floor, but the tailbone's pointing upward. On an inhale, point the tailbone down, feel that little arch rise up off the floor and the front of the bottom of the ribs kind of rising. And you can take these movements with each breath, exhaling to point the tailbone up and inhaling to point the tailbone down, or you can pause for a few cycles of breath in each pose. But But see if you can just isolate that movement to the direction of the pelvis. The next time your tailbone begins to point upward, pause there, let your breath flow. Take an inhale into the belly and then exhale to press into the feet, lifting the sacrum just a smidge off the floor. So we're not looking for a super high bridge pose here, just isolating our effort now to only the effort that helps hold the pose. So softening the jaw and the hands and the breath. This is the principle of abhyasa, which is well-placed effort. Do you ever notice that you've done a whole lot of work that was not needed? So we want to make sure that any effort we make, any work that we do is helping toward that end. On an exhale, release your spine back down to the floor. Maybe the knees fall side to side or come in towards the chest for a moment. And here's where we might use that block. We're going to come back into our bridge pose, but this time we're going to try to use the support of our block. You could also use a cushion or something here. This time we're going to point the tailbone down. So feel the bottom of the ribs rise, that little arch in the spine. Take a big inhale into that expanded belly and then exhale, keeping the tailbone pointing down, lift the spine again. Notice the different shape in the body. And then just draw your block or whatever support you're using underneath your sacrum so that you can rest the flat part of your sacrum on that support. So we still have heart open, heart forward, and spaciousness in the front body. But at this point, we've kind of relinquished most of the effort. We've allowed ourselves to rely on the support that's underneath the body. And you can think about what this support might look or feel like in your own life. Maybe this is friends and family. Maybe this is just a particular person or activity that brings you joy when you're feeling down. But by allowing this other support to keep you open, we invite in that flow of love and guidance and creativity. We keep ourselves in that positive place. So make sure you're really trusting in this support. And then we're going to try a couple of little challenging motions here. So if none of this feels good to your back or your spine, just refrain and just kind of stay in your supported shape. We're going to see if we can extend the right leg. So lifting the right heel off the mat and extending the leg, letting the right heel come back to the floor. This is kind of an extreme stretch at the front of the right hip. So just kind of notice if that feels good or not. And just take a few breaths here. See if you can maintain that steadiness of the breath and that calm as you extend yourself a little deeper into this work. After a few breaths, we're going to begin to bend at the right knee again and let the right knee just kind of hover over the hip. So this should feel a little bit less strenuous, but depends on how trustworthy your support is here. We're going to cross the right ankle over that left knee or the top of the left thigh, and just as gently and using gravity, let the left or right knee kind of fall down towards the floor. And just pause here. Notice how the right knee falling a little open to the right changes the shape of the sacrum. Might shift your relationship to your support a little bit, just notice. And then finally, we're going to extend the right leg up towards the sky. So reaching the heel upward. Ideally, the heel is kind of right above your hip, but it's okay if it's a little further away from your chest. And just apply a little bit of effort to lengthening that right leg. Couple more breaths here. And then we'll bend at the right knee to come out, coming back to that sole of the foot on the floor. Maybe just take a moment to adjust your body, make sure you're trusting in that support that's below you.
And again, we might lift the left heel off the mat and extend the left leg. It doesn't have to be fully straight, even just a little bit straighter can be enough of a challenge for the body. So just let your body rest on that support. Maybe the left toes even fall open a little bit to the left. Notice how this change in shape shifts your relationship to your support, remaining open in the chest and the heart, and allowing that breath flow to move through us. After a few cycles of breath here, we'll bend again at the left knee, letting the left knee hover right over the left hip. Just notice the change in the shape of the body. Just pause here for a few breaths. Then left ankle rests on the right thigh, just above the knee. Let the left knee fall to the left and downward towards the floor. And this isn't us really pushing or applying effort here. This is just allowing gravity to place your left knee. Notice the shift in the body. Seeing if we can still stay steady and allowing of that flow to move through us. And then finally extending that left heel upward towards the ceiling. Ideally, hovering that heel right over the hip. And applying just a little effort here to lifting the heel even as the left side of the sacrum is steady and sunken into your support a little bit. After a few cycles of breath here, we'll begin to bend the left knee again, bringing both soles of the feet to the floor. Take a little pause here for maybe 3 more breaths or so. And without turning the head, we'll press into the feet, lifting our sacrum off of our support so we can set our support back out to the side. And slowly allow the sacrum to touch back down to the floor. Knees might fall side to side or pull in towards the chest a little bit. And then from here, we will allow the knees to fall to one side, rolling to the side. Take a moment to just pause and then rise back to a seated shape. We're going to float from here into the knees coming underneath the body, tabletop for just a moment. We're going to make our way into a child's pose. So we could use that block between the ankles to set the sitting bones down on as we walk the hands forward, tucking the chin in towards the chest before allowing the head to rest on the floor. You could also just take a traditional unsupported child's pose if that feels good to you. Arms can reach towards the top of the mat, or shoulders might rest on the thighs and the hands come down by the ankles. Remembering here in this shape the way that we were when we were kind of gazing inward towards the heart center. And letting our focus be on that inward space. Noticing that we don't see as much in our periphery in this shape. We're focused intently inward. And yet we can still feel that spaciousness at the back of the heart. The shoulder blades open, back of the heart still open to receiving guidance as we look inward. So much of what we can actually change and transform is not so much out there in the world as much as it is inside the self. And yet, as each practitioner, as each spiritual seeker, as each individual human being begins that work inward, the world outside begins to change as a result. So take maybe 3 more breaths here in child's pose, looking inward. If your hands are alongside the body, maybe shift those back forward again. And then we'll start to rise kind of into a tabletop, but leaving the whole forearm on the floor. So elbows to fingertips are still on the floor. And just kind of rising back up, Chin to chest for a moment. Feel that inward gaze. Then on an inhale, soften your belly down, let the hips kind of rise, lift the chin, look forward. So heart is open, and we're back to gazing outward again. Let's take a few of those. So at your own pace, you can take a few breaths in each shape, or you can move with your breath, your choice. Just notice what helps keep you steady. As you kind of land in each shape, keep your gaze steady either inward on the heart or outward, but keeping it focused. Notice how much you can take in each shape. Then come back to a neutral spine. We're going to lift back up into our tabletop shape. If you were using that block behind your hips, maybe set it aside for a moment towards the top of the mat. We're going to walk the knees back a little bit and then walk the hands forward to allow the whole belly to rest on the mat. Palms can be face down underneath your shoulders, or we can keep the forearms on the floor. And we're going to begin our back bending shape not by lifting but by lengthening. So see if you can stretch from the origin source of your tailbone, kind of stretch upward towards the crown. Notice how your chin might automatically lift off the mat. Then you can use the muscles of your back or the support of your hands and forearms to rise up. This could look like a Sphinx pose with elbows on the mat. It could look more like a cobra shape with elbows pulling inward and hands on the mat. It could also look like an upward facing dog or a seal pose where the hips also rise. So just kind of notice what feels good to your body, but keep the heart open, the gaze steady. On an exhale, you can release your body back down to the floor, palms coming underneath the shoulders, first pressing up through tabletop, tucking the toes underneath the body. Before we rise into downward facing dog, spread your fingers and press into your hands. Feel a lift at the back of the heart, a separation between the shoulder blades. See if you can maintain that shape as you press into the toes and hands to lift the knees off the mat. Chin coming in towards your chest, again gazing inward, keeping your focus steady and fixed, but trying to take in as much of your peripheral vision as you can. So what's different about looking into the heart here than what we found in child's pose is because our heart is elevated, we now see a lot more of our periphery as we gaze inward. Just kind of take that in. So as we grow, as we become enlightened, as our heart becomes more elevated by this presence of breath and divine influence, even as we seek inward or focus inward, we begin to see more. Let both feet travel to the top of the mat to find a forward fold Uttanasana. Both feet steady at big toe, pinky toe, and heel. Upper body fully softened and surrendered. Arms and hands might dangle or grasp for opposite elbows here. We might even feel a little sway in the upper body just to notice that it's loose and relaxed and passive. Even as our foundation of legs and feet is strong, there's that balance of effort and ease. Bringing ourselves into a little bit more of full effort. We're going to inhale to a flat back. Hands might rest on the shins. We might gather our blocks in this shape to rest palms on the blocks for our flat back. But extend long from tailbone to crown. Keep a little bit of softness in the knees, but a steadiness in the legs and feet. Then inhale to sweep up and out. Palms are going to come together above our head, gazing upward at the thumbs. Exhale, hands to heart. Then we'll reverse that just like we did seated. So inhale, prayer hands rise. Exhale, sweep out and touch either the earth or your blocks. So we'll take about 4 more of those. Inhaling to sweep up, gather up all that's around you. Palms touch, gazes upward. Exhale, hands to heart, drawing in that guidance. Inhale, offering our work back upward. Exhale to touch down to the earth to manifest it in the world. So Take a few more like that. Notice how your focus or your gaze shifts as we move from position to position, but try to keep as steady as you can, meanwhile taking in as much periphery as you can. On our last round, we'll end with hands at heart center, standing. So as you find your way back to that neutral standing shape with hands at heart, we're going to shift our weight into the left foot. So we'll start to pull the right knee in towards the chest. Hands can remain at heart, or maybe it's more steady to interlace fingers at the front of the right knee. Feel the left ankle shifting. Press into the left foot a little bit. Find a little bit more steadiness in that leg, but acknowledge the constant flow that keeps you in balance. And falling out and coming back in is part of the balancing process. From here, we're going to draw the right knee out further to the right. So just kind of opening ourselves up. Knee might stay bent, or we might reach for the foot or toes and extend that right leg out to the right, up to you. Notice what keeps you steady and focused. And eventually that right foot is going to come somewhere on the left leg, high or low, to find tree pose. So we're asking a lot of our standing leg. Hands can be at hips or heart or raised up. It can take any variation here that helps keep you balanced. Maybe you find a drishti or a fixed point for your gaze. And even as you are steadfast in that, seeing how much of the rest of the environment you can take in. From here, we're going to release the right foot from the left leg and step towards the back of the mat. So do so slowly so you can maintain your balance. Heel and toes of both feet are on the floor. Heart is shifted forward. If your hands are at your heart here, inhale and reach up. Exhale, sweep your hands down, either finding hands on hips or maybe interlacing fingers or grasping for opposite elbows. Lift the gaze, lift the chin. So we're back to that upward gaze, noticing how even though our gaze is fixed, we can see a lot of the room around us. We sort of have that higher point of view, which isn't so that we can look down on others and so that we can take in more of our environment. We can be responsible for and acknowledge more of the resources and rich abundance around us. We're going to come back to that looking inward place. So releasing your hands. We're going to come down, maybe hands rest on thighs, shin, or we use our blocks here. But chin is going to come in towards the chest. We have that tall, lifted back of the heart as we gaze inward. Notice how much periphery we can see here. Legs are still straight, keeping a gentle softness in the knees. Just notice where your left hand has landed, if it's on thigh, shin, block, or floor. We're going to shift the right foot so that toes and heels face long edges. And keeping a steadiness in your left hand, roll your heart open to the right. Right hand might reach up. It can also, again, come to your right hip. So some options here. Notice where there's sensation, and as your heart and gaze are shifted to the right, keep that steady focus and see how much of the environment you can take in on the right side of your mat. Softly, we're going to start to bend into that left knee a little bit. Hand might stay on the block or floor. We might scoot that block a little forward of the left pinky toe and see if we can start to shift our weight into that left foot. Maybe the right toes can lift off the mat here. So again, we have our balance, same position, very different level of balance and concentration. If you feel really comfortable in this half moon shape, we might bend at the right knee and let the right hand come back to reach for the ankle or toes, opening the heart a little further forward. If you've taken that variation, see if you can keep your heart open in that way and then come back into half moon. Challenges. Next, exhale, start to bend at your right knee to step it back forward towards the left foot. Hands might come back to blocks or floor here. Inhale to find your long, lengthened spine, and then exhale to fold. We can either hinge back to that flat back and rise, or you can roll your body up to standing, but we're gonna come back to that neutral spine, hands at heart center, balanced on both feet, steady, keeping your gaze focused. Maybe find that drishti that you can focus on, and then weight's gonna shift into the right foot. Nice and slow, left foot peels off the mat, left knee comes in towards the chest. Maybe we grasp for that, maybe we keep hands at heart center. Notice what serves you. Eventually that left knee is gonna come out wide to the left. So hands might support, we could keep that knee bent, or again, we might try to extend the left leg long. So just noticing where you are with your practice today, what helps keep you focused. Keep your attention on pressing the right foot into the floor to keep the steadiness, even as your ankle shifts to balance you. This is part of the flow. There is no stillness, there is no stagnancy. Eventually that left foot's gonna come somewhere on the right leg to find our tree pose. Keep pressing into the right foot. Hands can be, again, hips, heart, or up high and wide, wherever they feel most comfortable for you. Take several breaths here. Acknowledging even in our highest level of concentration and attempts at stillness, there is still a flow that keeps us balanced. As we acknowledge this flow on the mat, we're more able to recognize it off the mat. Take another breath or two before freeing your left foot from your right leg and stepping towards the back of the mat. So heels and toes on the mat, heart is facing forward. On an inhale, hands rise. As they exhale, sweep them out wide and down, either finding hands at hips or interlacing or grasping for opposite elbows. Then lift the chin and the gaze. Find that upward look, helping us to focus on higher things. Kind of looking away from our own heart center to see how we can open to guidance and allow that action that we take from that guidance to benefit all. See how much of the environment you can see as we look upward and outward. Then on an exhale, release any bind in the hands and start to fold forward. Maybe we find the thigh or the shin or our blocks. Chin comes in towards the chest as we look inward again, keeping the legs straight and pressing into whatever we're supporting our hands on so that we can lift and open the back of the heart. And just like we found in down dog, because our heart is lifted, because we've elevated ourselves here, our gaze inward still includes a lot of the outward periphery. So here comes our strong challenge on this side. We're going to softly bend into the right knee a little bit. Right hand might be on the floor or a block. If it's on a block, we might scoot it forward a little ahead of the right toes. Shifting weight into that right foot. We're going to see if we can pop that left leg off the mat and roll our heart open to the left. Maybe the left hand rises. Maybe it rests on the hip. If you're comfortable in half moon here, again, we might bend at the left knee and reach back for the ankle or toes on the left foot, opening the heart, kind of bowing the body. If you've taken that variation, see if you can maintain that openness in the heart and come back into our half moon. Feel the movement, keeping you balanced, how much effort is required. Couple more breaths, find your steadiness even as you flow. Then left hand will come down towards the floor or their block. Left knee will come in towards the chest, stepping to the right foot. Exhale, find your low forward fold. Let the arms just kind of hang or rest on the floor, maybe opposite elbows. Find that soft sway in the upper body, even as we find stability and steadiness in the legs and feet. From here, let's take 5 more of those sort of prayerful motions with our breath and hands. So touching either the earth or your blocks. Inhale, sweeping the arms up. Palms come together above your head. Receiving into the heart as you exhale. Inhale, offering your work back up. Exhale as it manifests into the world by touching the earth. 4 more like that. As we finish our rounds, we'll stay in our forward fold to finish. Just allowing ourselves to look both inward and downward towards the earth. Blocks can be scooted out of the way. Knees can come to bend as the hands touch the floor. And then just bending at the knees enough to let the sitting bones come down to the mat. So we could use our blocks in a couple of different ways here. We could allow the soles of the feet to come together and knees to fall open. Perhaps blocks could be really helpful in supporting the knees. If you take this variation, just lean back into your hands and lift your heart open. If your knees do not need or require support, you can also use your blocks behind your back, just creating a little bit of space between the two, so that as you lean back, the bottom of your ribs is supported by the first block and the back of your head is supported by the second block. Arms can be anywhere, knees can fall open here. So either way, we sort of have a back bend and an openness in the hips. We'll take about 5 to 7 slow breaths here. Find that sense of trust in your support, whether that's your arms or your blocks. Find that sense of openness both in the pelvis and the heart center. Allow the tailbone to point gently down in either variation to remain grounded. And just let yourself be open to receiving that guidance and wisdom. Gaze might be steady and eyes open, or eyes might be closed and the gaze is more of a focus on internal sensations here. Just another breath or 2 in your back bend shape. If you're resting on your hands or on your blocks, just let your knees fall together. If you're reclined back on your blocks, you can either roll to one side or press your way back up to seated. Blocks can be set aside. We're going to take one more little move here before we find our resting shape. We're just going to take another set of twists. So keeping your blocks somewhat nearby that you can reach them once you're reclined. Come back down to the sacrum, shoulders, and skull on the mat. And we're going to use one of our blocks to kind of steady the legs. So depending on the size and shape of your body, how you use the blocks between your knees can depend. You can take it in any position, just kind of grip gently, not thigh master, just barely holding. the block between your knees. And then softly, we're gonna lift the feet off the floor just like we did in our boat pose. And allow the knees to just kind of hover right over your hips. Just enough pressure between the knees to hold the block in place. And we're gonna find a little bit of effort here first before finding rest. So kind of gaze at the block and let your block come about 4 or 5 inches to the right and pause. So we feel a little engagement in our core, but the rest of the body is soft and relaxed. Come back to center. Then shift that block about 10 or 12 inches to the right and pause. Come back to center. See how close you can come to the floor without touching. So challenging yourself, kind of balancing on that right hip. Left shoulder stays grounded if it can. Come back to center, and now we take a full release. This time as your knees shift to the right, let your right knee come down to the floor. That second block can be used underneath. And just let your body soften. Let go of all effort. Come into a state of sukha or ease. Notice where your gaze is. If it's still pointing straight up at the ceiling, it could stay there, or you could turn to let your nose fall away from the knees. The idea is that the world is always moving around us. There's always action in the world. And likewise, our bodies and our lives reflect that swirling motion or that turning. We want to see if we can find a steadiness even in that turning. So letting go and allowing the flow to move through us rather than trying to direct it. 3 more breaths here. On an exhale, we'll come out of this shape by coming back to center. Soles of the feet might touch down to the earth to neutralize the spine. Then eventually, holding our block gently between the knees, our knees will come back to hovering over the hips, and we'll take our same effortful twist here. So let your gaze focus on the block and shift gently a few inches to the left and pause. Come back to center, 10 or 12 inches to the left this time, and pause, balancing on that left hip, grounding through the right shoulder. Back to center. See how close you can come to the floor without touching. Challenge yourself, keep grounded through that right shoulder, heart is open. Soften your jaw, your breath, and your hands as you hold this challenging shape. Come back to center, and then again we'll find our more restful twist, letting knees come all the way to the left side. Making a choice about where our gaze rests. Maybe it's straight up towards the ceiling, maybe it's slightly to the right. Soften. Feel the movements of the world around you. Maybe you hear sounds or see light play. Feel the turning motion in the body. And then soften and allow that flow to just pass through you. Remaining open. About 3 more breaths here. When you're ready to come out, draw your knees back to center on an exhale. Feel free to remove your block from between your knees and take any other motion here to help you neutralize. Maybe some rocking, maybe some rolling along the spine, perhaps a short inversion like bridge pose or something for a few rounds of breath. And then we'll begin to set ourselves up for resting pose.
Then come into your deeper stillness. Perhaps there's a way to lift the heart just a bit in your pose to keep yourself open. Maybe we take a few long, deep exhales to soften the body a little more into the floor, finding a little bit more of that passive stillness. Letting go of being the doer. Getting our own agenda out of the way and simply allowing breath, life force, love, and compassion to flow effortlessly through the mind, the heart, and the body. Focus your awareness on the gentle movements inside the body, the heart beating, the diaphragm pumping the air in and out of the lungs. And feel that movement simultaneous with the stillness of the bones and softness of the muscles. Feel that give and take, that effort and ease. The heart continuing to beat in each moment, very similar to that abhyasa of well-placed effort. And the stillness and softness, the relaxation and passive nature of the reclined body, very much like vairagya, that letting go of attachment to outcome, that sense of allowing. Even as you begin to bring a bit more effort to the breath, extending the inhale and exhale, feel how your longer exhale even brings more passivity to the body, letting go, finding that deeper stillness, a heaviness in the bones, and an even softer feel to the muscles. And start to bring small, gentle movements, transitioning very slowly from stillness to finding small movements, fingers, toes. Continuing to deepen your breath. Take whatever stretching or pulling inward that you need. And begin to slowly, over the next several breaths, work your way back to that steady upright seat we found at the beginning of class. So no rush, just kind of knowing where you're headed, letting go of any attachment on how you arrive. And as you come to that seated place, again, find that steadiness in the low body. A little bit of effort in the diaphragm to lift and open the heart. Again, relaxing the shoulders, noticing that relationship between opening and letting go of responsibility. Hands will come again to the floor. And one last time, we'll take that 2-breath action, inhaling to sweep up, palms touching, gathering that wisdom and pulling it into our heart center, receiving that guidance. Inhale, offering our work back upward. Exhale, manifesting it to the earth. And from there, just bringing hands back to heart center, chin dropping to the chest, inward gaze. We offer all of our effort and all of our openness and allowing to a better life for ourselves and for all others. We ask that our work and our ease be contributing to wholeness for all. So we close our practice with this prayer of service. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May all beings be happy, healthy, safe, and free. Namaste.